So recently, I've been thinking a little bit more about how Japan has kind of influenced my perception on goal setting and my perception on kind of my own identity as a person, as a foreigner, and just as a general person living here. And it's interesting because I touched a little bit in some of my previous videos about this fact that, as a foreigner here, you're kind of constantly going through these repetitions, these routines. Um, I likened it to Bill Murray in the Groundhog Day, right? That, you kind of have these like set 30-second interactions with people over and over and over and over and over that just, as a foreigner, you'll be asked the same 10 questions, 15 questions, 20 questions every day. And there's kind of just like no getting away from it. I do notice that, at the same time, I do notice that as somebody who I think I just come across as more confident now, people can tell that I can speak Japanese quickly. I mean, I make sure that that's known quickly, and I just know how to kind of carry myself more here that, people generally just do that less. And it's interesting. There's definitely a lot of key indicators, like kind of things that give you away that show that you're a tourist or that you haven't lived here for very long or that you're not trying to adjust to fitting in with the rest of people in Japan. I think one of the most obvious things there is like the fashion. People in Japan don't really wear specific things. There's a whole video I can make about that I probably will. But, personally, after being here for 10 years, I can usually tell how long somebody's been here just by the way they dress, the way they walk, the way they line up for things, in general. But, as you go through those different repetitions in your day-to-day life, you start to kind of chip away at how you're interacting with people, and your interactions can start to feel kind of overly rehearsed. And I don't know how I feel about this, because I think it's a very useful life skill to have, to know how to turn on and, turn yourself on, turn yourself off, and, go into sales mode or go into networking mode and just be able to talk to people, make connections, put your best foot forward, and show off the best side of yourself. It's a very important skill to have. At the same time, kind of the nature of conversations in Japan really go against this idea of ever being able to have any kind of spontaneity in your interactions with people or your relationships, at least when you're not drinking. There's a really strong drinking culture here, which I kind of made fun of in one of my previous short videos that I uploaded last week. But yeah, it's like when you're just having normal interactions with people here, things are expected to be done in a certain way, in a certain step, in a certain order, at a certain time. And so not even just as a foreigner, just as a person living in Japan, things can kind of feel overly, kind of like rehearsed, or they're just kind of like set into a, certain kind of standard, almost like you're following a manual. And this can, I don't know, it's like, as somebody who has more attention put on them than other people in Japan, you can be put in a difficult position, because this is already a lot of pressure for Japanese people. But to be kind of like given the opportunity to prove how Japanese you've become on a daily basis, and then kind of like expected to uphold that, or it all kind of comes crumbling down, like that feeling of all or nothing within the communication style here and people's perception of foreigners can be difficult. There isn't really a lot of middle ground that people have towards accepting that, for example, that a foreigner might understand a lot of things about Japan, but they don't know this one thing. It kind of is this mode people get into when they notice that you don't know something as a foreign person. They treat you like you're a baby. Whereas if you know a lot of things about Japan, they'll be really impressed and they'll just treat you like a Japanese person. But the second you don't know one thing, you instantly lose all of that and you become kind of the bumbling foreigner. And I don't know why this is, but it is like that. It's like, an all or nothing. And I remember somebody, maybe on Reddit, they wrote this story about how they like had gone through all of these things with their significant other's family. They maybe had a funeral that day or some kind of family gathering, some important thing. they're doing all the things the Japanese way. They're dressing the Japanese way. They're speaking in Japanese the whole day. They're trying to, speak to people with the appropriate level of keigo and, the right, like in their seniority, and being very polite and sitting in the proper seiza, like sitting on your knees, and just painful. I used to be did some karate here. As my friend is a black belt. I'm still, terrible. My Japanese friend kind of got me into that, but yeah, that is very painful. But, in that story, he's doing all these things. He's really, doing gaman, like I've talked about in my last video. He's really persevering through the pain and, trying to just do his absolute best to show respect and to, just try to fit in with the other people around him. And then the second that I think he said the second that he drank milk out of like a carton, like not a carton, but like the small cartons, like the normal, like a carton that you would drink out of if you were buying like for lunch or something. He drank out of that instead of using the straw that came with it. And that wasn't very Japanese. And then all of a sudden, everybody for the rest of the day treated him like he's the foreigner because he did that one thing. And I can relate to this so much because I was in the seminar class in my university where it was just me and like 19, 20 other Japanese people just doing debates in Japanese for like 4 or 5 hours every day. And we're debating about, Japanese culture, and it's called Nihonjinron. I always struggle how to translate this, but I think it's like the study of Japan within the overall anthropological landscape of humanity as a whole. So basically where Japan stands as far as like unique things about Japanese culture and everything. And we have like debates on Japanese, Japanese culture versus the West and everything. And I remember there was one time where they said that Westerners need therapy. Like they have all that therapy stuff. I'm paraphrasing a bit, and this was in Japanese, but he's like, they have all this therapy stuff in the West because they need that, because Westerners have weak minds or something, or like they have all these issues that we don't have in Japan because people's minds in Japan are so healthy that we don't need to talk about any mental health issues. And I'm just like, I'm there being very careful not to say anything because, I mean, anyone who's had serious conversations with a Japanese person knows that there's a little bit of a culture here of like dishing it out but not being able to take any criticism back. Like they could say all this stuff about other countries, but if I say, oh, but like the suicide rate in Japan is pretty high, like all of a sudden it's really awkward and I'm this asshole and like, how dare you, and I love Japan, but it's just like from a logic standpoint it was like annoying me. It's also because I struggle with some depression too, so I felt a little called out there. But there were a lot of situations like that where we were having these debates, and I would say something like, even trying to just be like the middle, take the middle road of like not being. This was a very Japanese class, by the way. Most Japanese people aren't like that, but this was like the top class of a pretty decent international program at this university, and people had a lot of pride. I thought this was strange, but this was the way it was. People had a lot of pride about like being in that class in a very Japanese way, and it was a very Japanese class, even though this was the top class of the international program. Was like, it kind of annoyed me a little bit that it was like so Japanese, but at the same time it was a great experience. But something that kind of came with that is like some of those kind of weirder, more right-wing ideas. And I think that people maybe felt like they had a right to say those things because like a lot of them were kikoku shijo. Kikoku shijo in Japanese is basically somebody who used to live outside of Japan, usually when they were like little kids, and then they came back to Japan later. Kikoku literally means like to go back to your country. So if somebody said like, oh, are you going home? They won't say, well, maybe they say, oh, kairu, but they would probably say, oh, kikoku shiteru no? Are you, kikoku? Are you doing kikoku? Right? But usually that would mean like in the context of Japan, kikoku shijo is coming back to the country, coming back to Japan, right? So, and shijo is just like kid, I guess. But, yeah, there were a lot of situations like that where I felt kind of uncomfortable. But I did my best just to have good conversations with people and, Try to be fair and try to just enjoy the experience of all that. But there were a lot of situations in that class where it was like it was so Japanese. I mean, they were like the amount of just like, you know, joge kanke, like seniority based ass kissing towards everybody, just endless drinking parties. Everybody's like, you know, just gassing the teacher up and pouring his wine for him at these things every day. And like, you know, he would be like talking about some really academic, really dry thing for 30 minutes and with like just no breaks. And then at the end, and he would say something and everyone go, sugoi, wow, that's amazing. You know, it was so like, it was just like so hierarchical. And it was like, honestly, it was like being in a David Attenborough documentary or something. Like, I mean, it was great though. It was a great experience. But there were a lot of times where like I was doing so much of that stuff where I was like, you know, I was meeting them 99% of the way there, 95% of the way there, but all I could see was the 5% I wasn't doing, you know? And that could be frustrating, right? So, yeah, I totally empathize with that story because I had a lot of experience with that. In fact, it's funny, I actually wrote an article on my blog a long time ago that I had an experience where I had a similar thing with orange juice, where it was like I was in class or something, and for some reason at university in Japan, everybody just drinks like either cold green tea or coffee, like in a can, and or water. And so if you have anything other than those three things, you're not Japanese enough. And so you know, most of the time I would just have coffee because I drink way too much coffee. But that day I was like, oh yeah, I don't just feel like something else. So I got an orange juice, and like every single person in my class was like, oh, Amerikashi, oh, American, you know? It's like, I'm like, really, guys? Like, I'm sitting in this class, you know, I'm having like a debate on like, you know, exclusive economic zones in Asia and land disputes over the Senkaku Daio Islands in Japanese, and everyone's gonna comment about how American I am because I'm drinking fucking orange juice. It was like, I was a little annoyed with that, to be honest. But, you know, eventually also, like, I mean, I think, I don't know, I've reached a point now where, like, I feel more Japanese than ever as far as just, like, these little things I've picked up on, but I also just don't care anymore about, like, I am who I am, you know? And that goes the other way too. It's like, you know, I've lived in Japan for 10 years. I'm from America. I grew up in America. I'm not either at this point, you know, and that's okay, right? Like I'm more American, but you know, it's like I'm not fit into either of those dynamics, you know? And that takes a certain amount of strength where you have to kind of give yourself some credit for that at a certain point and be like, okay, like, it's okay for me to identify with that a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. It is an interesting dynamic for sure with a lot of these things. But I think ultimately it's just something that you kind of you kind of just have to decide what's important to you. Like, do you want to be, is it that important to you to be Japanese that day, or can you just be yourself? I don't even know what that means anymore, you know, but can you be like 90% Japanese and be okay with the fact that people are going to point out the 10% all day? Like, what are you doing it for? Is it for you? Is it for them? They're just interesting things to think about. And I find myself thinking about it more and more as time goes on. So yeah, probably a topic I'll never wholly have a conclusion on, but yeah. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I think you might enjoy one of these. I think I said this last time and I forgot to put the end screen up, but I'm gonna do it this time. And yeah, obviously, if you enjoyed these kind of videos and you want to hear more about my life in Japan, or just like these kind of Japanese concepts, studying abroad in Japan, getting basic tips about how to do that, then I'd really appreciate you supporting the channel by subscribing, liking the video. I'm pretty happy. I'm almost at 500 subscribers, which is nice. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching up till now, guys. And yeah, have a great day or night, wherever you are. Okay, see ya.